Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Marketing Live for Monday, July 24th, 2017. Hope everyone has been having a terrific summer, and wow, here we are, fall semester, the beginning of the semester just around the corner. I'm Rob Zinkin. I serve as Associate Vice President for Marketing at Indiana University. Us passion brands in the age of disruption. Marketing Live is part of the Higher Ed Live network. Our episodes offer you direct access to the best and brightest minds in education and beyond. We invite you to be a part of our live broadcast by sharing your knowledge and posing your questions. You can participate in the discussion. Just tweet us using the Higher Ed Live hashtag. All of our episodes are free and easy to access in the archives at higheredlive.com, or you can take Higher Ed Live with you on the go by subscribing to the podcast. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a digital-first agency committed to tailored solutions that drive real results. Do you need help getting full buy-in for a website redesign? A higher education website checkup with M. Stoner will provide objective feedback and give you and your team a clear roadmap for improving your site. We're tweeting out a link shortly so you can. Jeff Rosenblum with us today. Jeff is the founding partner of Questus, an agency that has worked with some of the world's most influential brands, ranging from Apple to Disney, NFL, Verizon, just to name a few. And he is widely considered one of the leading innovators in the field of digital marketing. Jeff is the co-writer and director of The Naked Brand. We'll talk more about that. A groundbreaking documentary about the future of the advertising industry. If you've not seen it, it's a must. Absolutely fascinating. And Jeff Rosenblum is the author of the book Friction. Friction, we'll discuss and get into that at length today. So Jeff, great to connect for this. So glad that we could make it happen.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, to kick things off, I'd love to dive into your professional background a little bit and your journey. And as you reflect on that, is there a specific experience or something in particular that you can point to that has had a lasting impact in terms of shaping your career and in terms of getting you where you are today?
Wow, that's a great question. I think there's probably a lot of people, both my mom and dad were quite influential. I've only had two bosses in the entire span of my 25-year career, Jacob Brown and Haldane King. They were both influential, but mostly it really just came down to being fairly aggressive, being an absolutely terrible student, and in trying to basically trusting my gut. So the long and short of it is, when I graduated college with a pretty mediocre GPA, I'm so old I predate the internet, right? There was no monster.com, there's no hot jobs, there's no LinkedIn. So I literally went to the yellow pages and I went to M for marketing, and I literally called 20 companies every single day, 20 new companies. So you started compounding effect of all the other companies. I called 20 new companies till I finally found a job, and these guys wanted no part of me. I literally cold called, and I talked them into a 3-month internship, and quickly I was able to say, okay, because I'm an outsider, probably because I'm a bad student, I can think of things differently. And I came up with some cool ideas and helped them land Levi Strauss. And so that was cool. We were doing all this very traditional research, mall interviews, mail interviews, all that good stuff. And at the time, my bosses were they were grabbing these 5.25-inch floppy disks and putting them into the computer and trying to hook us up to this thing called the internet, right? AOL and CompuServe and all that. And quickly what I realized is, if everybody's going to be connected to the internet, then everything we're doing in the traditional world, talking to people on the telephone, talking to people at the mall, talking to people through mail, is going to quickly go, digital. So I happen to be one of the very first people in the country to sort of pioneer the field of internet research. So quickly I went from a bad GPA, zit-faced kid to having Microsoft, Netscape, Sun Microsystems, Walt Disney, Levi Strauss were all my clients at a pretty early age. So given that you're an education-based podcast, I guess the whole lesson in that is you got to trust your gut, right? If you think you got a good idea, just go for it, because the world is changing. I didn't grow up looking at guys like Zuckerberg, but, the next generation really is. And really profound and powerful things are being done by young folks nowadays. And if you've got the energy and you've got a vision, go for it. Whether you're working for a big company and you want to force it through, or you're an entrepreneur.
That's fantastic. And I mentioned the Naked brand in the intro and would love to hear some backstory in that in terms of how does a video project turn into a documentary film with you as writer and director?
Yeah, I mean, I'll pick up on the chronology because what happened in that last story is even though I had those great clients, I quickly got bored, to be honest with you, right? I wasn't built to be a market researcher. I wasn't built to pour over tons and tons of data. I was sort of faking it. When the coffee ran out, I needed a new thrill. And what I realized is all these companies that hired me, not just to collect data, but to collect data about what works and what doesn't work on the internet. So what I realized is almost everything, like 80, 90, sometimes more, sometimes close to 100% of my big clients' dollars were being wasted with activations that didn't work. So I actually hiked down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, had this completely psychedelic experience. In the middle of this psychedelic experience, I had a very non-psychedelic thought, which is, why don't I go start a digital agency? So ran out, completely inspired, called my college roommate, world-class designer doing world-class work. And I was like, dude, let's go start an agency. And he's like, well, have you ever been in an agency? I'm like, no, I've never stepped foot in one. How about you? He's like, no. I'm like, well, let's just go do it, man. The ads that we see, everything sucks. We can do better. So we started this agency. And to make a long story short, we were always thinking differently. And we were always thinking about what's next because what's already been done is no longer going to work. And that's what led to the Naked brand is after, we started with a bunch of non-agency people. We quickly won Agency of the Year. And then we won Agency of the Year again. And then I got bored again. And then I was like, wait a second, why don't we make a video about what's next? And like most of my good projects, I lied. I lied to myself. I lied to my friends. I lied to everyone I can get my hands on, only because I didn't know any better. I was like, we'll make a 3-minute project and it's going to take 2 weeks. And then 3 grew into 7 and 2 weeks grew to 4 weeks, about a year. And every time we showed it, more and more brands got involved. Patagonia got involved. Unilever got involved. Under Armour got involved. These world-class brands. And it grew from what we thought was going to be an interesting 3-minute thought leadership piece all the way into full-blown documentary. We literally went around the world multiple times. And, I'm credited with being the writer and director or the co-writer and co-director. But honestly, to this day, I have no idea what a director of a documentary film does, right? We literally drank pots of coffee. We pounded the phone. We called some top-level executives. We had brain scientists. We had Shaquille O'Neal. And all I know is that we had a story. We called these people. We did some illegal things with the cameras. And lo and behold, it turned out to be good. The thousands of people that saw it, I only had one person raise their hand and be like, nah, I don't really like it. Everybody else was like, wow, man, this thing really is telling the story that we're looking for.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Highly, highly recommended, as I mentioned. And so that's the documentary film, and would love to hear the story behind the book. The book is called Friction, and again, a great read for higher education marketing. The story, the motivation for writing the book, and then as we start to talk about it, if you could kick us off by giving us a definition. When you talk about friction, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, a few questions in there, all great ones, and I appreciate it. So what happened is the documentary came out a few years ago, and we are still getting people like calling and asking about it and loving it. And what we realized is it was time to get to the next level and either show a modernized version of the story with newer brands, or more importantly, perhaps get a little bit more granular with the actionable advice. And my business partner, Jordan, was like, dude, we got to do the Naked brand part 2. Everybody loved the Naked brand. We're going to do Naked brand part 2. I'm like, look, man, it ain't Terminator. It ain't The Godfather. And every other sequel to a film sucks. Why don't we just quit while we're ahead? Why don't we try writing a book? And of course, that sounds kind of ludicrous because A, we're a digital agency. B, people can barely read nowadays because they're getting hit with so many short tweets and Instagram posts and whatnot. The concept of a book seemed crazy. But I'm a reader. I'm a voracious reader. I love a good business book, and I felt like there was a lot of information out there to share. That said, as you know, and you've seen in the book, it's really a unique book. It's not written in your typical business book approach where it's 100,000 words and there's one point and we're hammering on that point for 10 chapters. It's really a series of very short stories. There's a lot of stylizing and design to it. It's actually bigger and heavier. We tried to make it experiential. Because what I realized is I'm not Malcolm Gladwell, right? There's one Malcolm Gladwell. He crushes it. Everybody else is sort of pretending. So I wanted to go in a different direction, make something experiential, make something completely unique. I knew right from the get-go, 20% of the people that read it are not going to like it because it is so unique in that way. But the response has been really positive, and it's really heartwarming. And, you know, before I answer the question about what it's about, I always try to, you know, give some advice on podcasts like this, particularly when speaking to an educational community. The lesson that I learned in all this is you do have a lot of content within you. And if you have enough information to share, you can write a book, or you can make a documentary, you can make a video series. It's really just about time management. And at the end of the day, I had a ton of information out there. I had a world-class team. I had like 6 of the smartest people I've ever met, and they collected tens of thousands, literally tens of thousands of data points and thousands of pages of research. And I just set my alarm for 4 o'clock in the morning. Excuse me, that's a lie, 4:30 every morning. And if I set the alarm for 4:30 every morning, and I made sure I didn't look at any of my digital devices, I made sure I didn't get distracted with work or homework, I just fully focused on this for a couple hours. At the end of it, and it didn't take that long, once I shifted to that approach, you can create a story. And, you know, I think the world has an insatiable need for content. So if you want to write a book, magazine articles, or any other thing I haven't thought of, find that pattern in your life where it can fit. I know other people that do it at 1 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't matter. You just got to fit it into your life. Now, to finally answer your question, what is friction, right? Friction is anything that holds you back in life. It's anything that gets in the way of anything you want to accomplish. Anything that gets in the way of your hopes, your dreams, your aspirations, or even your mundane day-to-day goals. And what I realized is, as a marketer, as an advertiser, there's very little that I can do to create a passion brand purely through advertising. People are looking for more from brands. They're looking for brands to solve their problems. They're looking for brands to improve their lives one small step at a time. And that's what removing friction is all about.
And I want to follow up on a lot there, including the perspective on advertising, which is one that certainly resonated with me in the book. And it's a salient topic for higher education because ad spending in our sector is growing at such a significant rate. For example, 4-year public institutions have increased ad spending from a short period of time, 2013 to 2016, by more than 40% on average. So could you give some background on the history of advertising and how this approach, I love how you title it The Machine, how it really hasn't changed a whole lot while the whole world around us has?
Yeah, I mean, you just summarized it. Really hasn't changed that much at all. And if you look at it from a cursory standpoint, it might seem like it's changed quite a bit because there's all this stuff going on with the internet and, you know, these terms like programmatic advertising, and then there's stuff that happens with YouTube and pre-roll, and there's tons and tons of remarkable amount of data and targeting and social media and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, we're all doing the same exact thing that we've done since the dawn of time, which is interruptions. We're building our brand through interruptions. And if you think about any walk of life, if you're trying to be influential, if you're trying to build a relationship, interruptions are one of the least effective forms of communication. If I were to interrupt you or vice versa, we would not become friends very quickly. It's rude, it's annoying. Instead of bringing us together, it repels us, right? So advertising used to be really effective, right? There was a time where people would sit around the TV, they would be completely engrossed in whatever show they were watching. There was 3 major networks, didn't even have remote controls. Advertising would get on, and you know what? It provided value. There was no way to comparison shop. So first of all, people were still engrossed in the content and in the ads. Second of all, they believed the ads. Third of all, there was value because if they were, like, let's say you're in the market for a new refrigerator, well, where else are you going to find out about all the different brands? And where are you going to find out about different features and functionality? You got to drive to the retail store 20 minutes. If that doesn't work, you got to drive another 40 minutes. Lo and behold, all these wonderful brands are coming into our living rooms. That all worked for a while. And I'll tell the story about Fred Flintstone in a moment, but for the most part, Fred Flintstone screwed the whole thing up for everybody, right? He started pitching cigarettes, people started getting cancer, people stopped believing ads. And then search engines came along. Now, when people said, hey, new and improved and all that, you know, people could go online and check the search engine and be like, is it new? Is it improved? You know, which of the brands that I'm looking for, right? There's this complete revolution that took place. And then Amazon came along where you got ratings and reviews in real time. And now you got social media and Instagram and Facebook and and then there's DVRs to avoid it. To make a long story short, 89% of TV ads are now proven to be ignored from ethnographic studies. And what's interesting is it's not DVRs. People thought people were going to DVR or change the channel. What's actually killing TV advertising right now is social media. Because when the TV ads come on, people don't even bother to change their behavior as it relates to TV. They just look down at their mobile device. They mess around on Instagram for 2 or 3 minutes. When their show or their ball game comes back on, they look back up, right? So TV is in a big pickle right now. But if you look at digital advertising, you've got a better mathematical chance of surviving a plane crash than clicking on a banner ad. That's the actual numbers, right? Because who wants these things? Who's going to click on these things? You're on a mission. You're on the information superhighway, and then we're trying to interrupt you with pre-rolls and pop-ups and banners. It just, it's a medium that could change the world. And what do? We created pop-up ads. So we just need something better. And that's what fighting friction is about, right? It's about creating content. It's about creating experiences that people go out of their way to participate in. And then they take that content and they share it with their friends. And the only way to do that is not simply creating content or making something interesting or making something entertaining. You have to provide value. You have to improve people's lives one small step at a time.
Well, with that in mind, Jeff, what role then should advertising play in the marketing mix? Because it can serve the purpose that you just articulated, and it still has its place, but perhaps just in a different.
Yeah, absolutely. So great question. It dials back to your previous question. What we believe is that advertising can still do absolutely incredible things. We're just asking advertising to do too much. And we built something that we outlined in the book called the brand hierarchy. And the quick summary of it is brands first need to focus inward before they can focus outward. You have to look at your own leadership, your own behaviors, and then from there, create content and experiences here for people to buy your products, content and experiences that elevate people in the totality of a category, right? It's about improving people's lives through that information. Once you've got all that figured out, all advertising has to do is create a gateway into those experiences. We no longer have to tell the whole brand experience in a 30-second TV ad, in a 15-second pre-roll, in a 300-pixel banner ad. It's not enough real estate. But all we have to do is say, look, here's some incredible information that's powerful for you as a consumer. Come and get it, right? Because if you don't have advertising, it's like having a candy store in the desert, right? It's a wonderful idea, but nobody's going to be able to find it. Unfortunately, most companies are just putting all their money or the lion's share of their money into those paid media interruptions instead of putting it into content and experiences. So long-winded, but let me answer your previous question, which was about higher ed and the amount of dollars getting spent on advertising there. There's nothing wrong with higher ed spending money on advertising, except if they're spending it on very traditional advertising. If they're following Procter & Gamble and what worked for Procter & Gamble 30 years ago, it doesn't work anymore, right? If I were to see an ad for Harvard, one of the great universities, Indiana, one of the great universities, I think it may be counterproductive. I'd be like, wait, why are you advertising me? Why are you interrupting me? That seems strange. But if it was like, look, we've built incredible content and I'm going to improve your life, right? I'm in marketing, right? You built a bunch of content and stories and in interviews with some of the world's greatest marketers or advertisers. You've got your own proprietary data all about advertising, right? Anything that's going to improve my life as a professional or as a student, right? Put some of the classwork online, you'll figure it out, right? There's some expertise to figuring out what the content is. But then the advertising just has to say, hey, come check out the content. But if the advertising is, hey, come here and come join our university and apply to become a student here, no way. You're skipping too many steps.
It's great advice, and particularly the point about the advertising doesn't need to tell the whole story, that it can be a gateway. And that's such a challenge, I think, for colleges and universities because our missions are so broad and we do education and service and research. And so the story is a big one. And we do try to tell oftentimes the whole story. And so that's one of the things that I think we can work on as a sector to improve. And I'm curious, the examples that you mentioned in the book about passion brands, whether that's Yeti or Patagonia, Under Armour, that you mentioned in the introduction, what do these brands do specifically, and perhaps other brands that you cited in the book, that meet the mark in terms of truly being a passion brand?
So fighting friction is about one simple idea: empowerment. It's about improving people's lives one small step at a time. So as we dial it all the way back to the theme of what it used to be about when it came to brand building with interruptions, we simply call it empowerment over interruptions, right? So Patagonia, so they create outdoor gear and apparel. Well, the friction that resides in that category is really ironic, which is the products that they create to enjoy in the great outdoors actually damage the great outdoors, right? When you buy a new jacket, you create garbage out of your old jacket. When they create your new jacket, they create manufacturing byproducts. There's no way to circumvent that. So what they've done is they've invested in making a healthy environment at every single place that they interact with the consumer. So one of them that I fell in love with is they had this campaign called "Don't Buy This Jacket." So when I made the documentary and I met Yvon Chouinard, and I fell in love with this platform called the Footprint Chronicles, where you could watch a product as it gets manufactured around the world, and they would expose all the damage that happens to the environment, right? This really counterintuitive idea. So I fell in love with the brand. I wanted to buy this blue jacket. I go up on their website, and I came across the actual blue jacket on their website with a bold headline, giant, said, "Don't buy this jacket," right? And the point is, there's a button, you click on it, reduce, reuse, recycle, right? Reduce is number one. We'll sell you the jacket if you want to buy it, but then it's going to create byproducts and it's going to create garbage. Why don't you buy less? And then they've got a documentary called Worn Wear, and it celebrates people who have had the same jacket for decades and decades and decades. It celebrates people who buy less from Patagonia. And they obviously give money and donate to different environmental causes, but they have events that happen in their retail stores. Like every single place that you can interact with Patagonia, they're defending the environment. They're empowering people. They're improving people's lives by giving their outdoor enthusiast customers a healthier outdoors, right? It's about creating content. It's about creating experiences that fight friction. And the friction there, once again, is to enjoy those products for the outdoors. You need a healthy outdoors. Now, bunch of people have heard these stories and completely misinterpreted. Everyone started jumping on the green bandwagon, right? Coca-Cola, save the polar bears. Like, dude, Coca-Cola doesn't care about the polar bears, and nobody's believing that, right? People don't wake up in the morning expecting brands to hug the trees and save the manatees. It doesn't have to be about this big altruistic cause like Patagonia, right? It just has to be relevant to your category. If you're in the hospitality space, give people a better vacation. If you're an airline, give them more comfortable air travel. If you're in outdoor sports and apparel, help them perform better as an athlete, right? There's all different things that any brand in any category can do.
A terrific example. And I'm curious, Jeff, if you have any examples from perhaps the nonprofit sector or anything that higher education marketers might relate more directly to, whether that's nonprofit, even education, or some that maybe you didn't touch on in the book Friction.
Yeah, so fighting friction is really holistic, right? It's not just about how you build your brand. So my favorite nonprofit, and I should have put him in the book, I don't know why I didn't actually, but my favorite is Charity Water, run by a guy named Scott Harrison. And he fights friction at every step along the way. So what they do is they get clean water, and they've learned that literally millions and millions of people get sick and perhaps die because they don't have access to clean water. Now, there's lots of great charities out there, but these guys are one of the hottest in terms of the amount of good that they're doing, the amount of funds that they're raising. So one of the things that they do is 100% of the money that you donate to Charity Water, 100% goes to these clean water causes. Unlike every other charity where they're trying to figure out, okay, can we be 87%? Can it be 84%, 91% based upon reducing their admin? What they did is said, look, everything that they need will be paid for by huge companies. So Twitter, I think, and a few others. give dollars that support the internal admin and the executives and their office space and all that. That way, anytime you donate money, 100% goes. Now, the second thing that they did is they used GPS technology. So if you donate, let's say a round number of $100, it's not like, hey, your money went to Africa. Like, they tied those dollars to GPS technology. So when they put a clean water well in a specific place in Africa, you know exactly where those dollars went. You know exactly the benefits that your $100 created. What else did they do? Oh, the other thing that's really cool is they don't actually just say, hey, give us your money. What they've done is they've built a very simple tech platform that says, look, you can be a fundraiser. So let's say it's your 40th birthday. Instead of having all your friends come over and have a party, have all of your friends through this link, through this system that we provide, have them all donate $40. So if you got 40 friends times $40, you just raised $1,600, right? So they're saying, look, if you want to be involved, we can go deeper than just opening your wallet. We can find a system to help open up your social graph. And then we've seen all these great things like, you know, little girls living off rice and beans for a couple of weeks, you know, people doing all sorts of fascinating things. I won't shave for months as long as people donate. So they're turning people into this fundraising platform. So what you're hearing here is that they're fighting friction at almost every step along the way. And by the way, the other thing that's really cool about them is it's beautiful. They built the Charity Water brand just like any other world-class brand. You know, they're like the Apple computer of branding. It's beautiful in aesthetics, and sort of the organization of information is really important nowadays, right? People don't have patience to deal with the micro friction of confusing experiences.
Great, and thanks for sharing that example. And a reminder to our listeners, if you have questions or comments for Jeff, please join our discussion. Use the Higher Ed Live hashtag on Twitter. And on that point, colleges and universities should be very well positioned in terms of their ability to develop passion brands. We have so many great stories about the transformative power that higher education has in the lives of students, the difference it makes in the world. And we have, without a doubt, the ability to powerful content, powerful experiences. But because of some of these market forces, especially in recent years and changing landscape and increasingly cluttered and competitive environment, many schools have turned to advertising and ramped up their spending. So you've given some great advice, and anything else that you might recommend to those who are responsible for marketing their institution, who manage their institution's brand. And I asked this question also, Jeff, with a comment from your book in mind, that the more evangelists you have, the fewer ads you need to buy. And I think that's another point that aligns perfectly with what you've articulated.
Yeah, it's a great line. I think I probably borrowed it from somebody else. It's been, you know, bouncing around our agency. I think it might have actually come from Brian Halligan over at HubSpot, who's built this whole inbound marketing platform. But, you know, if you look at what Patagonia is doing, you don't have to buy anything from Patagonia to benefit from their content and experiences, right? You don't have to buy anything from Patagonia to learn about ways to defend the environment. You don't have to buy anything from Patagonia for them to actually take action and defend the environment. So what we're seeing is these passion brands, which, by the way, we uncovered some research, this study called Firms of Endearment. Passion brands, brands that empower, they outperform the competition as much as 8-1 over a 10-year period. 8-1. There's nothing that can be done in traditional advertising that comes close to that performance. And with all the different channels and tools and Snapchat and Instagram and all this stuff that's out there and data and whatnot, it's easy to get confused. And it's even easy to get caught in giant PowerPoint decks. Here's the one thing. Ask yourself this, and then go for a long hike. And then after the hike, go for a long walk. And then try meditating or ruminating or whatever it takes. It's this. How do I help people get more out of my category? It's that simple. It's a heady question. It's a broad question. But think that. Because once you start thinking about, we could do this in Snapchat, we could do that in Instagram, you've already lost the ballgame. You're thinking about activations. And what you need to think about is, how do I help people get more out of my category? More value, more content, more ease of use. It doesn't matter. But that's That's the one thing. When you start with that, that is the entry point. When you start with at the activation level or the marketing level, you're already headed in the wrong direction.
Well, I appreciate the point about measurement, because I wanted to ask about that and the outperformance that the passion brands experience, because I think that's one of the appeals, as you said, especially in paid digital. We got caught up in all of these points that we can measure, whether they matter or not, impressions and click-throughs and requests for inquiry. So how else does measurement come into play in terms of it's hard to measure removing friction, and there's not necessarily a metric for that. So how can you help marketers in their mindset when they're so tuned into, we need to show clear ROI with this particular investment?
Well, you got to be patient is the bottom line. If you're looking for immediate conversion, well, then you're going to want to use direct response. Buy now, there's a sale, right? And if you're looking for engagement, then you're going to want to say, here's a cute cat meme. Click if you like cute cats, right? But at the end of the day, our responsibility as marketers is to ethically sell products. That's it. So all of this takes long-term planning. Think about that Patagonia execution, right? Don't buy this jacket. I was about to buy a jacket for like $200. Next thing you know, I didn't buy that jacket. So if you look at the metrics in the short term, it actually looks counterproductive. But what they got from me is my unwavering loyalty. And what they got from me is my evangelism. And now I'm up on your podcast and all your listeners have heard great things about Patagonia. And more important than that is all these people who are out there on rock climbing, in fly fishing adventures, right? And all the guides are covered in Patagonia gear, and guides by definition are the most influential people, right? And they wear Patagonia because they know that Patagonia shares their value system and takes care of what they care about the most. So the point is, it takes a while for some of these things to take hold. So what you need are patience in the bottom line financial metric. If you're looking at engagement and if you're looking at short-term conversions, you're not going to create a passion brand. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you want to dominate the competition and create a passion brand, you have to be patient.
Another section of the book Friction that really struck a chord with me was the point that in the age of transparency, brands are defined by the totality of their behavior, not their marketing messages. And at the core of this behavior, as you talked about today, is empowerment. And in higher ed, we work in very decentralized environments, and in some cases, siloed operations. So there's not necessarily one person, any one individual owning the totality of that experience, especially when you think of the lifetime of an individual in their engagement with the institution, whether that's a prospective student, an alum, and ideally a donor. So how are passion brands going about managing the totality of their behavior as a brand, and some keys that you think higher ed marketers could benefit from understanding that?
Yeah, I think the short answer that is most powerful, most effective is silos kill. And honestly, if I didn't run this agency already, I would start a company that figures out how large organizations can remove the silos that exist because they kill. Meaning, because we're in a digital world, in content, in commerce, in rational, in emotional, all live in this centralized yet decentralized place of digital, you have to remove those silos. It's incredibly inefficient and incredibly ineffective for one team to be doing one thing, one team to be doing another thing. They're not sharing in the data. They don't have a unified message, right? You've got massive redundancies, massive inefficiencies. At the end of the day, when I spoke to some of the great business leaders out there, Chris Craner from Universal Orlando, Kevin Plank from Under Armour, Tony Hsieh from Zappos, the most important thing that they do is they have a core message and they build an internal communication cadence. They have a system to break down those silos, share the information, share the data, and make sure that they've got a unified message both internally and externally.
That's outstanding, and I hope colleges and universities take that to heart. So such a great point and important point for our institutions. Well, Jeff, as we wrap up, I'm interested to get your perspective on the future of advertising and what that looks like beyond the naked brand, and especially taking into account technological advances and the fear that as technology advances, heck, are we just going to see more ads delivered to us in more places, which seems hard to believe given how many brand messages we're exposed to already. What do you see as the future of advertising?
Well, there's two questions in there. What's the future of advertising? What's the future of very effective advertising?
Mm-hmm.
The future of advertising is more messages, right? Because there's more screens. It's going to be almost perpetual. We ran a study over at Questis, our agency, and we found that the typical person is exposed to a branded message every 2.7 seconds that they're awake. Yankelovich ran a study, and it found that people are exposed to 5,000 branded messages per day, which is more than double the previous generation of 2,000, right? So now we're seeing more and more screens. We've got virtual reality technology, which literally goes directly through the optic nerve to the brain. There's going to be more and more messages. And through that, there's going to be more and more ability for us to either tune it out physically with ad blocking software or just tune it out emotionally because there's more information than we can handle. The future of marketing, the future of brand building is about creating value. It's about improving people's lives one small step at a time. And you'll know you're being effective when you don't have to solely rely upon those interruptions. Interruptions will still work to a certain extent to prime the pump. But at the end of the day, are people going out of their way to access that information? Are they repeating their access to that information? Are they sharing that information with others? Are they not just buying from you, but are they loyal? And more importantly, are they not just loyal, but are they outwardly evangelizing? And the absolutely only way to do that is to improve their lives, is to provide some utility, is to provide some value, and to wrap that in something that's emotional and interesting.
Excellent. Great food for thought for higher education. Jeff, this has been awesome. I think your work is inspiring, and I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it a lot.
And lastly, Jeff, how can listeners connect with you or learn more about your work?
Probably the best bet is our agency website, questis.com, Questus.com, or you can find me on all social channels at JRQuestis, at JRQUESTUS.
Excellent. Well, thanks again. Appreciate Jeff Rosenblum for being a part of today's broadcast and all the excellent advice for building. And as always, thank you to M. Stoner for making Marketing Live possible. Be sure to get reminders about this and other episodes by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter. You can browse the video archives at higheredlive.com or subscribe to the podcast. I'm Rob Zinkin. Thanks again for tuning in to Marketing Live on the Higher Ed Live Network.
Thank you.